So a working definition of assessment, I think, is worthy of revisiting, thinking about, that online assessment isn't really that much different from any other kind of assessment that you already do. So if we think about it, Popham, who's a very respected assessment scholar, tells us that educational assessment is a formal attempt to determine student status with respect to educational variables of interest. And of course, formal in this regard means deliberate, systematic, or planned. And variables of interest is a fancy way of saying whatever it is you're teaching, how students vary in what they know, how skilled they are, and so forth. Let's see. There are 4 traditional reasons to assess students. Those are determining students' current status, monitoring students' progress, assigning grades, and determining one's own instructional effectiveness. We do that as professors in our universities, whether we teach face-to-face, hybrid courses, or fully online. And all of these help us as teachers make decisions. For example, determining a student's current status helps us understand which instructional objectives to pursue. So what do we need to focus on more than something else? Monitoring students' progress tells us which part of the instructional program needs to be changed. So if students are doing very well in something, we can perhaps spend less time on it, or if they're a little weak, we need to spend more time. We have to assign grades because that's what we do as institutions. So which students get which grades, and also monitoring the effectiveness of our instructional sequence. You may decide to do a pre-post kind of assessment, what students know coming in and what they know going out. So there are also additional current reasons to be aware of assessing and assessments. And of course, the test results determine public perception. Students' assessment performances are included in our faculty evaluations as a rule. And assessments can improve the quality of instruction. So all of these are part of really any kind of assessment that we do, whether it's face-to-face or online. So I do want to address formative assessments and to a lesser degree summative assessments. So the underlying idea behind formative assessments is that formative assessments give you evidence of what students are learning. And you can use these assessments to adjust instruction in order to better meet each student's needs. So it's kind of along the way. These are assessments that help you along the way. And some of these could be student watching, they could be drafts, for example, that you ask them to submit to you, or even ideas, raw ideas. They can be rough and short and raw. And if they're assigned even a small grade, if you want to think of it as a participation grade, that's a way to have a formative assessment. So 5 key strategies for formative assessment. Okay, so clarifying and sharing learning intentions and criteria for success. So students send you something, maybe a very rough draft. You realize that they really don't understand what it is they're supposed to be aiming for. You can go back and clarify either to that student or better yet to the whole class. Revisit your instructions, maybe offer some clarity. I'll show you some examples of this in a bit. Another strategy for formative assessment is you as an instructor engineering effective classroom discussions, questions, and learning tasks that give you a sense of whether students are learning. So classroom discussions can be a great way for students to basically prove that they read something or that they are constructing an understanding of something. They're pretty easy to grade. They can really teach each other and spark each other for some of their learning. So it is a product, and they talk amongst themselves, and you have a way of formatively assessing whether or not they're doing what you're asking them to do. Another key strategy is provide feedback that moves learners forward. This is a great idea, but I think if you focused more on the objective, you'd be a little stronger here. Activating students as the owners of their own learning, which builds motivation, and activating students as instructional resources for one another, which echoes what we were talking about in classroom discussions. And I've included a few references which are very, very good. So do look them up if you want to. So another way of thinking about this is, so if we think about those 5 strategies, we think about where the learner is going, where the learner is now, and how to get there. So we have the teacher is clarifying learning intentions and success criteria. So that's where the learner is going. The peer understands those intentions and is perhaps able to share them. The learner, we want them to understand those intentions and criteria as well, where the learner is now. So the teacher can engineer effective, basically classroom activities. The peer can serve as an instructional resource for another peer, either by asking questions or providing another point of view. And the learners dive in and activate their own learning, and that helps a learner take ownership of what they are learning. And how to get there, the teacher provides feedback, and the students keep talking to each other, and the learners keep building their own, constructing their own understanding of what it is that the task or the objectives that you're trying to reach with them. And of course, any kind of assessment is tied very closely to any of your your teaching principles and your objectives. So even though we're kind of dividing them up into separate kind of webinars this morning, they are very interwoven. So you really none of us can separate these. So summative assessments. So formative assessments are kind of the way that you check in with students. You can offer feedback. It's part of the learning. That's where you can adjust your zone of proximal development with students, either individually or as a class. And of course, your summative assessment is the opportunity for students to show what they've learned, okay? And the key purpose of a summative assessment, whether it's an exam, a test, or some kind of assignment, is to help the faculty member, the professor, assign a grade based on how much the students learned about a particular topic. So, right, so that's really summative assessments are your final grade. And I really recommend that we institute as much in the way of formative assessment as we can to help our students get successfully to their summative assessment. So how do we do that? Okay, so updated Bloom's taxonomy, which I'm sure that you're familiar with, This is an interesting basic kind of way to think about this. So we have to understand something, and in order to do that, we have to be able to remember it. So we first have to remember something to understand it. We first have to understand something before we can apply it. We first have to apply something, or have to be able to apply it, before we can analyze it. We have to have analyzed something before we can evaluate it. We need to have remembered, understood, applied, analyzed, and evaluated a concept before we can create something new. So going on that, this is a graphic that I found helpful about Bloom's taxonomy, and it does help looking at the levels, particularly when we think about formative and summative assessment. So if we think of formative assessment in these smaller, these lower levels, and the summative assessment sort of getting up to these outer rings, okay? So remembering that level 1 is recalling information, and then these are possible tasks. So define, duplicate, repeat, state, okay? Can the student understand something? Can the student explain ideas or concepts? So of course, these verbs help us to think about what kinds of products we might ask students to produce in order to summatively assess them, or formatively assess them. Formatively assess them. Can a student apply a concept, a level 3? Can the learner use the information in a new way? So if a student is just parroting information, then they're probably at a level 1 or 2, but can that student use information? Demonstrate, dramatize, illustrate, so forth, okay? So analyze. Can the student distinguish between different parts? And so here we also have some verbs that help us think about what kinds of products. Can the student compare and contrast, or critique, or discriminate, or distinguish? Can they experiment, question, or test? Okay, this is really, there's a lot in our world that requires us to analyze. And this may be the point of your summative assessment. There is evaluating. Can a learner justify a decision? So again, we have appraise, but maybe a more sophisticated appraisal. Defend, judge, select, support, value, evaluate. So certainly there's going to be evidence involved in this level, right? So evidence-based. And then this outer level, creating. Can the learner create a new product or point of view? So again, we look at the verbs: assemble, construct, create, design, formulate, write. So these are the kinds of products that we're looking for, okay? It might be writing, well, whatever. I realize that you're all in different disciplines, so certainly whatever you assign students is, of course, commensurate with your discipline. So we're starting to sort of turn this train toward online evaluation. So Quality Matters is an organization that is devoted to online learning and how we can tell when our online offerings are what kind of quality they are. So I've put some resources here for you, but I want to take you for a minute, let's see, to, okay, I'm hoping that you can see me, that you can see this PDF that says specific review standards. So if you cannot, please unmute yourself and tell me. But okay, so this is the Quality Matters.
I don't think we're able to see the PDF.
Okay, thank you. That probably has to do with the where the PowerPoint is. Okay, let me escape PowerPoint. Okay, now can you?
No, I think you'll need to stop screen sharing and screen share once again using hitting
Right.
the PDF.
Yes, you're right. You are right. Okay, I'm gonna screen share this desktop, and it might be a little scary, but hopefully it'll work. All right, can you see now?
Right, perfect.
Yes, we
Thank
can
you.
see.
Thank you for your feedback. I appreciate that. Okay, so Quality Matters has this, this rubric that is considered an aspirational tool. So even those of us who are who've been teaching online for quite a while, it sometimes takes us a while to get to all of these in a way that we feel is up to par. So think of it that way. So we have over here some kinds of things that are always important to include, like the overview and introduction, and we're talking online learning here. What students are supposed to learn, the assessment and measurement. We're going to get back to that in a second. The instructional materials, the learning activities, the course technology, learner support, and accessibility and usability. Okay. So let's just assume clarity and learning objectives are made evident, and we're going to be looking at assessment and measurement. Okay. So the assessments, if we look at 3.1, the assessments measure the achievement of the stated learning objective or competencies. Okay, I'm sure that's not anything you don't know, but this is considered a gold standard of online education, and I wanted to share this with you. Okay, so 3.2, the course grading policy is stated clearly at the beginning of the course. 3.3, specific and descriptive criteria are provided for evaluation of learners' work, and their connection to the course grading policy is clearly explained. Okay, so this could be in your lecture that you may record that describes an assignment that you want. You will probably put it in writing, and you'll even do a lecture that speaks more pointedly toward these descriptive criteria, and maybe even their connection to the course or connection to your field. So students really always, from my experience anyway, if they understand why they're learning something and how it's going to help them later, it matters. And then the grading, and tied to the grading policy, that really does help. Okay, we're good here. Okay, thank you. Thanks for the thank yous in the chat there. So 3.4, the assessments used are sequenced, which sort of echoes some of our formative discussion, right? So you want to help students build towards success for whatever it is you want them to really come away from that course with. The assessments are sequenced, varied, and suited to the level of the course. So we want to change things up, keep it interesting, provide opportunities for students who aren't always the best readers. Maybe they like to look at videos or they need to do things. So we change it up and suited to the level of the course. So certainly a graduate level assessment is going to look a lot different than one for a first or second year undergraduate. And then 3.5, the course provides learners with multiple opportunities to track their learning process with timely feedback. Okay, so that's an interesting one, right? So that is, you can have multiple grades that have feedback from you. Maybe you devise some kind of a sheet that students track their own learning in some kind of way. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to close this PDF and go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so. Okay, and I'm assuming you can see fine because I've shared my desktop. And if you cannot, please, again, kind people, let me know. Okay. Okay, we have a little chat. Yes, I will. I'm happy to share this presentation. Okay, let me go. Okay, so, but what do you do now? I mean, I understand that you're trying to get your classes up and have them work. And what do? We want to finish the semester. We want our students to know that we care about them, to value the learning that we're obliged to provide. We're concerned about our content. So what do we do now and what do we do quickly? So we have to remember that students are just as wobbly as we are with this big change in the current situation. We have to remember that reliable devices and reliable internet may be a real issue for some students for at least some of the time. We need to review our courses and decide what's really important. What is the most important elements, and what can you carve away? What can you trim? You know, students are overwhelmed. Some of them are struggling with the technology and being in a different location. So we need to trim and really focus. And regarding what you decide to keep, it's important to convey information, instructions, and content in a very orderly and understandable way for students. And I realize that I'm kind of getting into teaching here, but as an instructor, it's really hard for me to separate instruction and assessment. So, and I'll run through this quickly. So, and we also highly recommend that it's asynchronous, meaning that you put up content, let students get to it, that you're not requiring them to show up at the same time just because of personal situations and internet and all kinds of things. I highly recommend the same day and time on a weekly basis for work due. For example, I do Sundays for my online classes. Sundays by 11:59 p.m. is when anything is due, period. That's the hard deadline. Nobody has to scratch their heads. For other classes, it's literally a minute before the start of class. So if I teach an 11 in the morning class on a Monday, all the work is due at 10:59 a.m. Nobody has to scratch their heads. We recommend online specific office hours, simplicity and streamlined. If you change any plans, give students ample notice, at least a week, if not more. Build into your revised curriculum small steps toward bigger projects to ensure student success. Formative and summative. And those smaller steps are you supporting students in the instructional relationship that you have with them. Okay, so I'd like to show you a few slides to sort of capture some of that. So this is from my own work. So a little welcoming visual, large font for sections, bold indents for resources. So for example, every week we have instructions for the week. I always let students know how much time I'm asking. This is content, steps of action, 9 minutes, resources. Okay, so that's what I'm showing you is one whole module page. So I try to have my module set up so that students don't have to go anywhere else but to the module page. And I'm showing this because we want students to be successful, right? So whether or not they're confused will show up in their assessment, right? So it does apply. So then as they move down in the module page, their textbook, and I tell them what pages to read in the chapter. And I never just say read chapter 2. I always say read chapter 2, restate the edition, say the name of the chapter, and include the pages. At least 3 different ways of saying something. And I give them a choice whenever I can. Choice of article. So they were to read one of these 2 articles that I did my best to correctly put in APA as a model to them. So as they scroll down farther on the module page, we get to the e-learning activities, which are things that they need to do for assessment. And at this point, we're talking mostly formative assessment. So a quiz over chapter 1. So I tell them what they can expect, how much time they have, how much each question is worth. It's 1 point, so they know what to do. I will take a look at the chat in a bit. Thank you, everybody. Hang on a minute. All right, so then they had, so this literacy action research project is a really big project that is due at the end of the semester. And we start way back at the beginning, like week 2. So, so they're doing an assignment, a brainstorming assignment. How would they collect data on these 3 possible action research topics? How, A, broadly sketch out how you would collect data, and B, how might you know when your question is answered? So I did one for them so that they know what I'm looking for in terms of depth and complexity and content. And then finally, I had a weekly discussion, not every single week, certainly not on heavy weeks, but an occasional discussion. So I tell them what they are supposed to read and what should come into the discussion. So whole class discussion over chapter 2 and one of the 2 articles, 2 points, and when they post, thoughtfully synthesize across texts, 2 paragraphs, visit the posts of 2 other classmates, reply substantively and collegially for 50 or 100 words. Okay, so there's a lot of sort of support in there in terms of what I expect. So that's a module page. And then lastly, I do a heads up. So a heads up is like just reminding them about what's coming up in the future. So I don't need to go over this assignment, but I tell them something that they could be working on even in advance, and that would be an early turn-in here. Okay, so where to now? So you're selecting your platform and remembering that students are wobbly, that devices and internet are an issue. We want to trim and focus. We want to be orderly and convey information in a really clear way. That asynchronous teaching is less stressful. That we want due dates that don't change. We want specific online office hours. We want to be simple and streamlined, and we want to build in small steps toward those bigger steps. So I've understood that some of you are considering Moodle, and I have used Edmodo with success as well. But I've linked some different things that I found. I did understand that Moodle is free and it's an open source platform. and they have demos that you can play with. This is a great page. This is the latest version of Moodle, and they have instructional videos and all kinds of like things that work well with Moodle right there. I also went to YouTube and tried to find sort of a channel that had, you know, how to create a discussion in Moodle, or, you know, there's so many, how do I start? How do I record a video in Moodle? Everything, right? And then in Edmodo, I tried to do something similar for you. And it is free, and it does have school closure toolkits, which we're all undergoing. These are different kinds of account types here, which you would be a teacher. Getting started with Edmodo, including videos here, and then many, many YouTube how-to videos for Edmodo. Okay, so rather than clicking into these places, I think I'll send the PowerPoint, and you can look at them. I'm sure you've done quite a bit of that yourself already. So, all right, so then, you know, there's a quiz quick guide for Moodle. So quizzes, I find, are really helpful. You know, they keep students accountable. They kind of get their attention. It does give you a sense, and if you write them so that they are self-grading, that is wonderful. So here's a tip for creating quizzes online. If a student gets something wrong, an answer wrong, I personally always provide where they can find the right answer. It might be a little bit lower level on the Bloom's taxonomy, but I feel like quizzes are sort of lower level, okay? I also assign big complex projects, and the assessment is completely different. But the thing that if you provide the answer, like if students get a quiz question wrong, you're going to save yourself a lot of conversation, and the students are going to be able to look it up themselves and self-check. So you're actually building in student independence. It takes a few minutes, but I really think it's worth it. So I've linked a video, and I've for Moodle quizzes, and also here's a video about Moodle discussion forum and how to set it up. 4 minutes, that appeals to me. And I realize you have limited time. So let's see. We're coming to the end of my presentation. I have one more slide for you. I've provided my email address, and I'm happy to correspond with anybody if I can be of any help. Just one more thing I'd like to do before I stop sharing my PowerPoint. I would like to just point out that you are invited, and that there's more information coming soon to a virtual conference, Partnerships, Learning and Service for High Quality Education. And our conference coordinators are Dr. Wes Hickey and Dr. Janita Olivares. So more information will be coming soon. All right, so at this point, I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. So if you would, please unmute and ask your question if you'd like, or if you prefer, you can type it into the chat feature. Can formative assessments be graded assessments as well? Absolutely. Absolutely. I encourage you to do that, so that students see in whatever platform you've chosen, there's usually a grade book. And usually the grade book will show an assignment that is not submitted or that the student didn't do. So it's also a way to kind of have a system that helps your students know if they're doing what they're supposed to do. So if they say, for example, they don't do the formative assessment that you ask them, whether it's a quiz or submitting a quick draft or an idea, you give them a 0. And it's of course up to you whether you invite them to submit it still. I usually do, and especially during the school closure, I say, please do submit this work. You can expect a small shave, but that's certainly your own philosophy and departmental customs. But yes, definitely do use formative assessments as grades to be another messaging system for your students. And somebody, Dr. Castillo, noticed that for a quiz, students are given 5 questions for 60 minutes. So my answer to Dr. Castillo, yes, it's a great deal of time, and it might be too much time. Could you mute your mic if you're not talking? Thank you. So Dr. Castillo, yes, it is a lot of time, and it might be too much time, but it's a way that I have chosen to do that. So clearly you can choose to do it quite differently. You might want to give them 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and that's it. And I look at it as an opportunity for students who may not have done the reading to construct an understanding, or students who have small children that interrupt them to be able to get up and attend to a family member without a lot of pressure. So yes, and I'm sure that you will do something that makes a great deal of sense for you and your students. And Erica talks about Kahoot. Yes, it's great. Kahoot is interactive, online, and can be done at the end of a class session. Yeah, that's an awesome idea. Dr. Aguila, sorry to call you Erica. Another person has asked, do I believe email submittal should be accepted if using a platform such as Moodle to deliver assessments? So I'm not sure if you think email to, I understand that. I think the person is asking, should we use email to accept student work? I personally try to use the platform as much as possible and save email for extenuating circumstances, but it's a matter of how much. I just feel like you want to have things as simple and as in one place as you possibly can. All right, so anybody want to voice some questions?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hello.
Okay. Sorry. Well, my other concern is when you were speaking about quizzes and discussion questions, because quizzes normally are lower level, and then it depends on the kind of subject you're dealing with. My subject is mostly ecology and evolution, which basically is targeted for a higher level questions. In the Bloom taxonomy, mostly it's evaluation of indices. But when you have a classroom with 60 students, how would you be able to cope with that challenge, whether you have to balance yourself with grading those kind of papers? And it was a really challenging scenario, because if you were to read and spend 5 minutes or 10 minutes reading a particular answer or response from a student, it will take you more than 5 hours to basically be able to finish the class.
I agree completely. And I would save your energy for either for a formative assessment, or perhaps office hours, some sort of a visit that you do with students, and they are required to have their idea, have certain things already done, and you can give them a lot of guidance in that. So I would rather use those 5 or 10 minutes in conversation with students, and they're taking notes, and they're responsible, or spend that 5 or 10 minutes in the summative end of things. I would, if at all possible, if a student gets a question wrong, because you had mentioned the lower level quiz things, to tell them where a better answer could be found. Now, it may be that it might not be an answer that's exactly in a textbook that they could exactly read, but perhaps you had dealt with the kinds of thinking and the principles involved in a lecture that you could refer to that, so it's not easy, and you've got to pick and choose carefully, and you have to value your own time and the students' time too, understanding they're stressed as well. But I think you must trim what you would have done had college been as normal. I hope that's a little helpful. One person has asked me a question that I think might be applicable to a number of us. Course Points has attendance and participation, but not live when using platform like Zoom. Okay, I wouldn't give points for attendance, unless you're doing an office hour. I have assigned a couple of points for students to show up to schedule using Google Docs and to show up at an office hour. I think that class discussions, if you set up a class discussion on a learning platform, that is participation. So it just takes a little bit of thinking a little bit differently. So think of that as participation. Commenting to peers is participation. I hope that helps. Well, colleagues, I'm grateful for your time. I hope that this has been a little bit helpful. And you are welcome to email. I know me, I've given you my email address, aconsalvo@uttyler.edu. If I can be helpful in any way, I'll type it in here.